for puzzling parts, and we're going to continue in the series of Karakuri Work Kits today. Today I'm going to be looking at the Newton box, so without wasting much time we'll get ahead and get started. As before, we've got the same tools. I've still got my gluing block, wood glue, pencil, gluing brush, I have my X-Acto knife and my set square. The one extra thing we're going to need for this box is we're going to use a screwdriver, so that's pretty much all we need. So we'll go ahead and open the box and see what we've got. So the same as the last puzzle we looked at, we get our instruction sheet. So this one, as you can see, is a little bit more complicated than the last one. There's more steps, there's more to this, so hopefully it's going to be a better box. And we've got our little bag of parts. So we'll go ahead and open that up and see what we have. Again, we're getting a selection of pre-cut plywood pieces already set up for what we need. So we'll go ahead and I'll just start laying these out the same as we have them in the instructions. What we can see in this is actually a little section that's not been cut very well. I'll zoom in and let you see that before I do anything with it. Let's see, what else have we got? So this time we actually have a number of nice little decorative pieces. So we've got a couple of pieces cut out of walnut and a couple of pieces cut out of maple, and they're going to create our decoration on the top of the box. What else do we have? So there we go, we got 10 pieces there for the top of the box. Then we have the base of the box, so just quickly go and have a look and see what we have there. Similar to the last puzzle we looked at, these have all been pre-cut, they've got nice grooves in them, so we're going to get nice square corners on them again. We have an outer base. It's worth actually noting here, just as I'm looking at this is the first I've actually opened the kit, that one side of this is actually slightly nicer than the other side. So when we come to gluing this in, we'll make sure that the nicer side is the outer side, and you know, there's a couple of little sort of chips and so on here, so we'll make sure that goes on the inside of the box. We'll never see it and it won't be a problem. We also get a screw, a counterweight and a rod. One thing I have noticed looking at this kit, which I didn't notice in the first kit, is there's quite a lot of rough edges on this one. So probably what I'm going to do before we go much further is I'll just clean up the parts that we've got just with a light sanding. Probably takes 180 grit sandpaper and just sand off any little burrs on the edges and tidy things up. So we'll go ahead and do that. As before, I'll zoom the camera in so you can see what I'm doing, and we'll get started. Okay, so that's us ready to get started, and as I said, we're just going to go and clean up a couple of these pieces. So just with a little bit of sandpaper, I'm just tidying up the rough edges that we have on some of these corners. We really don't need to do a lot of work here, it's just a very light sanding just to tidy up and remove any little burrs. I mean, so far I've been very impressed with the quality of the kits. The pieces are all cut pretty well, there's very little work to do, so there's not a lot to be done here, just as I say, very light tidy up, just to remove little burrs from the pieces having been cut. It's not unusual. So now I don't have a piece of sandpaper small enough to get into that hole, so I'm just using my knife and just tidying it up that way. Just give that face a quick sand. Now the other thing that I was going to do, and I'll actually I'm going to take a quick picture of this before I do anything more. Again, just to show you some of the little bars that we get. So excuse me while I do this. There we go. That'll let you see close up what we're doing. And again, I'm just going to take out these little burrs. It's really not much. It's just tidies things up, makes it better when we go to glue the joints. So there we go. And I think that's about us actually. The rest of the pieces look pretty good. So we'll go ahead and get started. The first thing that the instructions suggest we do is actually build what will be the pendulum for the box, which is made up out of our small rod and our box. Now, the interesting thing here is they don't seem to give any sort of idea in terms of how far along you should put this. And the diagram is actually slightly out of scale with the pieces that you've been given. So I'm going to, well, I know how this is going to work. Effectively, this piece is going to sit in here and allow our pendulum to drop. So what I do want to do is make sure that if we centre our pendulum into the centre of this piece, we want that to sit at a sensible distance. So pretty much we're going to centre it on the piece, and then as far down as we can, just kind of, you'll see when I post the instructions the sort of idea. What I will do is I'm going to mark the centre of this guy to make my life easier. I should probably use a smaller ruler, but never mind. This will do, I suppose. So we'll mark the centre of this guy, and I'll just quickly scribe that line. Now this is going to be entirely inside the box, so nobody's ever going to see it. It's not going to matter. Same for this piece, I'll do exactly the same thing. I say nobody's going to see it, so it really doesn't matter the fact that I'm putting pencil marks on it. It's going to allow me to line all this up so that when I glue it, it's all nice and square. So again, I'm going to take pictures as I go, just so that you have pictures for the blog. So you have to excuse me as I do that. I kind of forgot to do it with the first box. So with those pieces marked up, we're going to go ahead and glue that in place. So run a bead of glue all onto here. Now this is going to be entirely inside the box, it's never going to be seen, so you want to make sure it's well and truly glued on. Fortunately this time we don't need to worry about glue squeeze out, and to be fair, we don't really need to worry about whether the glue is over the area we're gluing or not. It's not really going to make any difference to us. So I'm just lining that on the line, give it a good push down, so you get it lined up roughly where we think it's going to have to be. I say you can probably check that if you just take the piece with the hole in it, and we're going to place that in, roughly centre it, and we can see that's looking pretty good. So what I'm going to do, put that to the side. Now I've got a little bit of glue squeeze out in the bottom. I could go and clean that up, just because I'm a bit of a neat freak. I kind of like my pieces to be nice and neat. Of course, doing that I've shifted it, so yeah, we're not too bad. So just pull the glue off the top there, and if I leave this for a minute, as I said in the previous video, the glue dries pretty quickly, so after a minute or so it's going to be dry and these two pieces aren't coming apart again, so we should be okay. So just taking all that excess glue off. I say you probably didn't have to, but I'm going to, just because I try to keep my stuff nice and neat. And the other reason for doing it is if we have a big glob of glue on the bottom, so effectively the bit I'm cleaning up just now, it may actually impact how the box works, given the way the mechanism on this box works. So there we go, nicely cleaned up, and we'll leave that to the side to dry for 10 minutes or so. By the time we're ready to do something with this, towards the end of the instructions in fact, this will be well and truly dried, so we don't need to worry about it. So I'm going to put that to the side, and we'll carry on with step number 2 and get the inner section of the box put together. So moving on to the next step, this is step number 2. We're going to build what will become the inside of the box. Now, we're using this fairly thick plate actually that has the square already glued and drilled in the centre of it. That's going to be the bottom of the box in fact. So the instructions show you with a small hatched section. Well, that's effectively telling you the square is on the underneath. So we'll take that, we'll take the 2 fairly short grooved pieces so to distinguish between the 2. We have a wide piece, we have a narrow piece. We want the narrow ones for this step, and we have 2 effectively flat pieces. They're not notched in any way. We need both of those. They're different sizes, so it doesn't matter which end we put them on, but we'll get that sorted out. Now this one is pretty straightforward in fact. We're going to put our other flat plate to the side, and effectively all we're doing is gluing these guys together into a box and then gluing all of that onto the top of our plate. So not a massively difficult step, so we'll just go ahead and do that. What I am going to do is I'm going to do as instructions suggest and put a little bit of tape onto each of our sides so that it's nice and easy to glue up. So we'll do that and get it all glued. Now when I'm putting the tape on here, what I'm making sure is that the bottom of the box, and it's worth noting that effectively these grooves have to be in the top. So what I'm going to do is make sure that my tape is not overlapping the bottom section. The reason being that when we glue this onto the base, we don't want to have to be able to remove this piece of tape to do so. So we're going to put that on. Same on the other side. And there you go, as I said, we've got the groove at the top, and you can see, turning that round, the tape's clear on the bottom so that we're not going to overlap the base. We'll do exactly the same thing with the other side. Again, making sure we put this on the right way. And we're ready to glue this up. So what I'm going to do is actually glue, I'll put this out later just now, we're going to glue together the walls and then we'll glue that onto the base, put a bit of tape on that, hold it all together, and we should be good to go. So let's go ahead and do that. Now when you're gluing this up, you want to try and make sure that you don't get glue into the slot that runs in the inside of this piece. The reason being that the lid is actually going to sit inside that, so if we get glue inside there, the box isn't going to work very well. So as I did previously, we're just going to take our glue brush, spread the glue across there, same on the other side, and as I said in the previous video, it's just easier using the brush when we're trying to get into corners than it is to use my fingers. So there we go. And just tidy up any little excess glue that you've got as you go. Have a quick look at the pieces and see if there's one side that you like the grain on better or it just looks better. And by all means put that to the outside. And we're just going to squeeze that into place, and just using my finger I'm taking out any squeeze out on the outside, and we'll pull that tight. We'll put the other piece in place, and what you're going to notice is the way I did this, I put glue up the entire piece, and of course part of that is now not required. So once we have these all in place, I'm actually going to take out that excess glue, because otherwise we're going to be left with a rather unsightly mess to clean up later. So put that into place, same on here, and then I'm going to take my my X-Acto knife and just firm pressure. It's kind of hard to see in the camera, I know, but just give it good pressure across that excess space that we don't want the glue on. Flip it over and we'll do the same on the other side. Whether you'll see this or not, I'm not sure, but I'll try and get it to a place where you can. It doesn't matter if the glue ends up on the tape, as long as it's not on the wood, we really don't care. So there we go. Now, given that these are fairly good notches, we should end up getting this pretty square, but it's worth just checking. So I'll stick my square against it, and yeah, we're getting a good square edge. I say the kits are designed with a fairly deep groove, so you're going to get pretty close to a square corner regardless. Before this dries up, we are going to actually glue it onto here, and that just means that the whole thing is kept square. Now, to make this easier, I'm going to put a bit of tape onto the base. Just neaten that up slightly. Put a bit onto there. And we'll do the same on each of the sides, just to let me pull a bit of tape up and hold the whole thing together while it dries. So there we go, that's ready to be glued on. We're going to flip this over, run a bead of glue around it, and then get it glued in place. This time I'll be able to use my fingers because it's a nice flat surface. And as you'll see, we don't need a lot of glue. A fairly thin bead is about all you need, just to hold everything in place. There we go. And just using my finger, I'm going to spread that along the base. You want to make sure you get a good coverage. As I said, it doesn't need to be on a... You're not trying to cover a cake with this stuff, but you do need it to be on enough that you're going to get a good glue bond. So we'll put that into place. This is where it's going to be slightly challenging, but again, my gluing block will help, so I'm going to place this down and just push down that way, hold it in place, and then we're going to rotate it, and if I don't stick the tape to the table, we'll do the same thing. And having done that on two sides, we should be pretty square, so I can go ahead and take that up. Each time I go round, I'm just pressing back down so that we get that nice and square. And as you'll see, I've got a little bit of glue squeeze out. That's not a big problem. We can always sand the outside of this box once it's all dried, and you'll never know. So there we go. What I will do is, I can see I have a little bit of glue squeeze out on the inside of the box, so I'm actually going to go ahead and clean that up now, because getting into that later is going to be a challenge. So if we just clean it up now, our life's easier. And I'm trying to get you angles that you can see what I'm doing here. Hopefully it works out, but obviously I don't see this until I edit it, so you have to bear with me, I'm afraid. There we go, and that's looking pretty good. So at that point we have the inside of our box pretty much made. That's most of step B. The only other thing they show you to do is to slide this piece in. Now the way I've got my tape makes that kind of a challenge, but we can probably do it. So I'm just going to cut this down on the side, cut it down on the side. So yeah, just taking that tape down on either side, that allows me to fold it back out of the way, and we can just check that our top plate slides into place. And as you can see, yep, it slides in quite nicely. So I'm pretty happy with that. So of course I'm not going to get it back out now. So here's a little tip. If you're having a stubborn piece, just stick a little bit of tape on it, and there you go, you can pull it back out nice and easily. So with that done, our inner box is pretty much complete, and we're good to go. I'm just going to clean up my surface because I did get a little bit of glue on it, and that doesn't help me any. And we'll look at the next step. Okay, so while our inner box is drying, we're going to move on to the next step. I'm actually going to move on 2 steps because I checked the fit of this before we finished. So what we're going to do is actually get our little decorative pieces put in place. So again, these are a little burr on a couple of them, so we'll just tidy that up. These really don't need a lot of work at all, I'll be honest. They're very well cut. So we're going to arrange these 4 little pieces into a nice little pattern in the centre of our top piece. So we're going to do something like this on the top, which is going to give us a nice little decorative piece. Now they're suggesting putting it onto the centre, so what we'll do is we'll mark up the centre of our piece. Again, same way as we did with the tree on our last box. We're just going to put this in. We can scribe a centre point, and same on the other diagonal. And that's actually going to help us quite a bit here, because it's going to help us to line up the pieces, given that we are effectively creating a box. Now, hopefully I've managed to do this in such a way that, yeah, my pencil marks are all going to be hidden. So that's fantastic. What I'm going to do is actually glue each of these pieces together and let them set, and then we'll glue that onto the top. The reason for doing it that way is it means that I can actually sand this before I put it in place. So I'll go ahead and get this glued up, and we'll get ready to put it on. Now you're really not going to need a lot of glue here, and I'm not going to glue all 4 pieces. I'm just going to put glue onto the sides of 2 and then glue it all together. So again, as before, just using my finger, spreading that glue around, and you'll see from doing this, I'm not trying to get 100% coverage. We're not going to need it here. This is just to hold the pieces together, and they're going to stick together pretty happily on their own without a lot of extra work. So we'll put these all together and just slide them into place. So I'm giving these a pretty good squeeze together so that they're held in place. I'm also gluing it to the base as I do so, not to worry. Fortunately, glue doesn't stick to the granite block, so this will come off quite easily. And there we go. What I'm trying to do as I put this together, and it's going to be hard to see given that my fingers are going to be covering the pieces quite a bit, is I'm trying to make sure I don't really have any gaps between the pieces, because that's going to look unsightly when it's finished. So there we go, glued in place and pretty much ready to go. And as before, I'm just going to clean up the glue off my block. So we'll give that 10-15 minutes so that the glue on the inside dries. I'll give it a light sanding just so that we have a nice flat surface all the way around. Just take any little edges off where it might not have been perfectly square, and then we'll get it glued onto our top piece. So we're pretty much ready at that point. Okay. Okay, so we've let this piece dry up for probably about an hour or so. So they're nice and solid together. They're not going to come apart. So I'm just going to quickly give this a sand down, just to remove any excess glue from the base. And as I said earlier, just neaten up the sides. So we'll do that. Now it is worth noting that once this is glued in place, we're not really going to be able to go back and sand it again, so it's worth sanding this to a finish now rather than waiting till the end, because as I say, it's going to be difficult to get to later, so it doesn't do any harm just to sand it up now. So I'm just trying to even up the edges as well. These weren't perfectly square. They weren't far off, but it wasn't perfect. So there we go. Now what I see on the bottom is one side's looking pretty good, the other side has got just a little bit of glue on it. So I'll make that the side that we glue onto our top piece. And I'm not going to worry about sanding it much further at this point. I don't know whether I'll put finish in this box or not, but for the moment that will do quite nicely. The other thing you probably want to think about is which way in this is going to go. So our top piece is going to slide in here. Now this should be perfectly square, so it shouldn't make any difference, and it is. But we're probably going to want to put this on so that the grain runs across the way. It'll make it stronger rather than getting it snapped in the corners. So put that in place. We're going to glue this on into the centre like that, and we'll be good to go. So I'll go ahead and do that, and we'll leave that to dry. As before, we're just going to put a reasonable dot of glue in the centre. As ever, I'm just going to use my finger to spread it about. And as you'll see, I'm not going all the way to the edges here. The reason being, I don't want this to squeeze out when we put it on the top, so we're not going to do that. Now, looking at the way they have this, they put the brown walnut pieces to either side, so we'll do the same. Put that in place, and I'm just using the pencil marks that I had underneath here as a guide. So we'll get that in place. As you can see, the glue effectively makes the whole thing slide around when we put it on, so it's easy to manoeuvre for the first 30 seconds or so. And I'm just going to do a quick double check in terms of the centre point, just so that we get this right. And there we go, that's us pretty good. So we'll leave that to dry up. This, as I've said before, a couple of minutes and this won't move. Within an hour, it's never going to come off there again. That's kind of important in this box because effectively we're going to require that piece in order to help us open the box, so we'll leave that to the side to dry. And that's us pretty much done for step number 4. So it's been about an hour since I glued this up, so we can go ahead and take the tape off that. It's finished and ready to go. So I'll quickly take this off and we can see what we've got. So there we go. It's looking pretty good. It's fairly square all the way around. What I would say is the base is just a fraction shorter than the sides, but we're nice and square. We can do a quick check. So yeah, we're square, we're looking good, and effectively, once that's dried, we'll have it in our box. What I will do is we'll sand up the outside of this box just to clean up the edges, just make it nice and smooth, because effectively this will this will be required to lift. It's not going to come all the way out, so hey, you're never going to see this, but it doesn't hurt just to tidy it up. So we'll go ahead and do that, and we'll get the base of the box built. So as before, we're just going to take this, take our sandpaper, and we're just going to give this a light sanding. It's not going to need a lot. The pieces are pretty good as they come. There's really very little to be done. It just tidies up edges, and if we do decide to put a finish on it, it will make it easy to do that. The other thing I'm trying to do here is just even up that back. As I said to you, the base is a fraction shorter than the inner box, so that just neatens everything up for us. The other thing it's doing is just taking off any tiny little bits of glue that's squeezed out and gets stuck between the tape. It just gets rid of that for us as well. And there we go. That's really all it takes. Doesn't take a lot at all. Just tidies everything up and gives us a nice clean edge. Lovely. So with that done, we're going to move that out of the way for the moment, and we'll go ahead and get the base of the box built. So this is section D in the diagram. We've got the 6 pieces here, so we're going to have 4 sides. We have an inner base, if you like, and eventually we're going to put the bottom on. So for the moment we don't need the bottom, we'll put that out of the way and we'll get this built up. As we've done before, effectively it's pretty simple. We've got a groove cut in here, and effectively this base section is going to fit nice and snugly into that groove all the way around. And again, we've got our nice lip that's been cut. You can see it's cut quite nicely there. So these pieces are all just going to come together, and we should end up with a nice square box once again. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. This time we are effectively going to glue this floating base in place, so we'll go ahead and put some glue into this groove as well. We're not going to need a lot because we don't want the glue to squeeze out, but we'll put a little bit in there. And again, we're going to pre-tape the sides just to make it easier. So I'll go ahead and do that, and we'll get it glued up. Again, I've got my glue brush sitting here, so that'll just make it easier to get the glue not only into these grooves but into the corners for our side pieces as well. And given we've got a nice big thick surface this time, I don't need to cut my tape in half. Okay. So we'll go ahead and get the glue in this, get it all put together, and that will be the outer box pretty much ready to go. And just a very thin bead in the centre, because this is not a deep groove, so it doesn't need a lot of glue, just enough to hold this plate in place. There we go. And again, back to my glue brush, and we're just going to spread that glue in there. I may need a little bit more. We'll see how we go. Doesn't help if you try and stick your fingers to the tape as you go. There we go. And then I'm just going to run the brush along that groove as well, just to spread it out a little bit inside there. Now, given that this is quite a deep box that we're creating, what I am going to do is just take the little bit of excess off, because otherwise it's going to be quite difficult for me to get in there. I've gone over slightly on this side. So with that done, we'll get this put in place. Now the way this shows it is effectively with the back sitting in here. So we'll put that in place, we'll put one of the sides in, and effectively I'm using this insert to keep everything nice and square. So we'll put that in place, and I'm just going to pull the tape up on the side. Then we'll go ahead, we'll put in the other side, and then we'll put the other piece with the groove in it on the top. Again, just give that a good press in, just pulling any glue that's squeezing out the side there as I go, pull that up, and then we'll drop our top in place. And there we go. As you can see, it all fits together very nicely. The kit is very well made, so the pieces are cut perfectly. There's really no extra work to be done by yourself in terms of fit or sanding anything down. You know, this fits perfectly squarely together, and really is a pretty good fit. I've made a few things myself where my fit isn't as good, so in terms of the kit, you really can't ask for more. The pieces are very well made, and I'm pretty sure whoever it is that's cutting these in the Karakuri group is doing dry fits of everything. They've got this well and truly down to an art, which is what you would expect from a team of guys that are as experienced as the Karakuri group is. So there we go, we've got our outer box built, so that's step number 5 complete and all together. There we go. Next up, we need to put the inner section into this and effectively put the locking mechanism in place. Once we've got that done, we're pretty much ready. So I'm going to go ahead and let this dry up for a bit, and then we'll get the top section put in place, put the lock in, and finish this one up. So the outer box is still drying, but in the meantime we can actually go ahead and get the next step ready. So believe it or not, step 6, we're going to put this aside for a second, tells you to put the lid back in place. So we're going to slide our lid onto our inner box, and to place this, so we have the cutout effectively facing towards us, and the slide is going to pull out towards us, and effectively the entirety of step 6 is to place the inner box into the outer box. I think we can pretty much do that. So with that done, joking aside, we're actually going to be able to go ahead and put the locking mechanism in place. So to do that, we're actually going to flip this over, and the little pendulum that we created earlier, we're going to actually screw in place. So we can put that in and take the screw that we got, take our screwdriver, and we're effectively just going to screw this into the pre-cut hole in the centre of our inner box. Now it's worth noting, once this goes in, the inner box isn't coming back out, so make sure you get this right. So we'll put that in place, and we're not trying to screw this in so tight that the piece is held in place securely. What we want to do is screw this in so that this pendulum moves freely. So we'll put it in, and what you'll find is, you know, as you can see, the pendulum spins freely, and that's what we want. We don't want this in too tight. Mine's possibly a little bit loose, so I'm going to just give it another sort of half turn, and there we go. So as you can see, this spins freely quite nicely. There's no problem there. So there we go. That's our pendulum in place. See, this has a slight amount of movement in it, but I say we're not trying to get a tight fit. We just want this to be in place and such that the pendulum will spin. As you can see, this will effectively allow the inner box to lift up when it's in the correct position. Our square here prevents the whole thing from coming out. But if you have a look at the top, if we get this in place and lift out, it allows our top to slide open. So there you go, that shows you the locking mechanism inside. Now, effectively the last step here is, once you've made sure this is going to spin freely, what you want to do is just check that when you put this base on, it still spins freely, because once this base is on, you're not going to be able to take it out. So if I put it into a position where it's locked, we'll see it doesn't open. If we put that back on, we spin it to the correct location, then what we should find is it lifts up and comes out. So the pendulum is moving freely underneath there and is not going to get stuck, because if it gets stuck, that's it, your box is now done. You're not going to reopen it. Once we put this panel on, that's us finished. So as I said earlier, have a look and see if there's a side that you like more. In my case, I've got a little chip out of one corner, so I'm actually going to make that the inside, so really you don't see it. We're going to put this on, a couple of bits of tape just to hold it in place, and our box is done. So again, I'm just going to run a bead around the inside here, spread that around my fingers. I'm just going to do a quick check that the tape is below the box on all the corners, because otherwise I'll end up taping it inside with the glue and then we'll never get the blue tape back out. So I'm just going to peel it away from this corner a fraction. The box has probably been sitting for sort of 15 minutes from when I glued it, so to be fair, it's probably well and truly dried and I shouldn't need to worry, but we'll leave the tape for now. So we'll run this bead of glue around the outside. It's not a big bead of glue, just enough to hold this in place. Obviously we're not going to be able to get to anything that squeezes out in the inside, but anything on the outside we will clean up once we're done. So there we go. Again, just making sure that I get the side that I want on the inside, and we'll put that in place. Just going to hold it in place, and just with my finger I'm going to run round and get rid of that glue squeeze out that I expected. So there we go, and then I'm just going to square this up so that we get that base plate nice and square. If anything, that base is just a fraction smaller than the rest of the box, but to be honest, probably not anything you're really going to notice. So just square that up nicely. Again, I'm just going to I'm actually going to take my cloth and just run it round just to get the last of that glue off. And what we can do is, once this is set, we can sand the outside just to bring the outside flush with that edge. So, quick little bit of blue tape. Just to hold it in place. I mean, this isn't, it's not as if this is something that has to be absolutely perfect. I'm not trying to clamp it with a great deal of pressure, because I really don't think this is going to go anywhere. And the amount of glue we have on that surface will keep this well and truly in place. So there we go, and that's our box done. So we'll leave that to dry for 15-20 minutes, then I'll come back, take the tape off it, we can give it a light sanding, and we're done. Okay, so the box has been drying for half an hour, something around about that. So it should be good and dry by this point, that I can go ahead and take all the tape off. And we'll give it a light sanding just to finish off the sides. I'm not going to go ahead and apply finish just now. What I may do, I've had a couple of requests actually to do a video on finishing, so I may do that at some point in the future. But in terms of the building of the box, I'm not going to do that in this video. So there we go, we'll take the tape off. Same on the sides. And we're pretty much done. Of course the tape may not be cooperative. There we go. So with that done, it's looking pretty good. The sides can certainly do with a little sanding just to finish them off. It'll just even up a couple of edges, and with a couple of places where there's been a little bit of glue come out when we've taped it, it'll just tidy that up. So again, we'll go ahead and do that. It's not going to take a lot. The benefit to sanding it on this block is I know that my block is flat, so I know I'm getting a good flat surface to work on. And the size of this means that I know that I'm not going to be sanding bevels into the edges. It's going to be kept nice and square. And to be honest, for now, that's pretty much me done. I'm not going to do much more to it at this point. I say when I come back and apply finish to it, yeah, I may actually do more. I'll sand it probably up to 320 before I apply a finish to it, but for now, that just takes the rough edges off, we get a nice clean edge, and we're done. So there you go, the Newton box from the Karakuri group. I have to say, in terms of the build, this one wasn't much more complicated than the first box that I did, the Kaku box. But in terms of the actual puzzle, this is a much better puzzle box. I certainly prefer this one in terms of the way that it works and the style of box itself. So I have to say, out of the two, this is certainly my favourite so far, if I can get my words out. So definitely the better of two boxes. I do definitely like this one. It's a nice box, the mechanism works pretty well. As you can see, you get things lined up and it opens perfectly. If you're off, then it's going to remain locked. So definitely a good fun box, and as you can see, the mechanism works very nicely. So there you go, that's the Newton box from the Karakuri group. Thanks for watching, we'll see you next time.